Sometimes life takes everything from you before it gives you something you never expected. Eli Stoltzfus had buried his wife, lost his daughter, and now found himself raising his 7-year-old granddaughter Anna in a world that seemed determined to test his faith. When his estranged brother passed away, Eli inherited a rundown farm in Pennsylvania Dutch country. The old place was falling apart, but it gave them somewhere to start over. Anna loved exploring the empty rooms and forgotten corners of the farmhouse. One day, she found papers hidden under loose floorboards. The documents revealed something incredible. The farm sat on top of oil and mineral rights worth over $100 million. His brother had kept this secret his entire life, living simply while sitting on a fortune. But why had he never used the money, and what was Eli supposed to do with it now? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown fields of the Stoltzfus farm, illuminating patches of Queen Anne's lace that had claimed the pastures where cattle once grazed. Eli stood on the sagging front porch, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, watching his granddaughter Anna chase fireflies that hadn't yet surrendered to the dawn. At 68, his beard had turned the color of fresh snow, and his shoulders carried the weight of too many farewells. 3 months had passed since the funeral, not Samuel's, but his daughter Rebecca's. The cancer had taken her swiftly, leaving behind only memories and a 7-year-old girl who asked too many questions about heaven. Samuel's passing had come just weeks later, as if the brothers were destined to bookend each other's departures from this world. The irony wasn't lost on Eli that he'd spent 40 years estranged from Samuel, only to inherit the responsibility of cleaning up what remained of his life. The farmhouse groaned in the morning breeze, its white paint peeling like old skin. Samuel had let everything go in his final years. The barn roof sagged dangerously, fence posts leaned at impossible angles, and weeds had conquered what was once a pristine vegetable garden. Their father would have wept to see the place in such condition. Johann Stoltzfus had built this farm with his own hands in 1952, clearing rocks and stumps until his palms bled, dreaming of generations of Stoltzfus children running through these fields. "Gross Daddy, look what I found!" Anna's voice carried across the yard, bright with the kind of wonder that only children possess. She ran toward him, her bare feet navigating the uneven ground with surprising grace. Her prayer covering had slipped sideways, revealing blonde hair that caught the sunlight exactly like her mother's had at that age. In her small hands, she clutched something dark and leather-bound. As she climbed the porch steps, Eli could see it was a Bible, its cover worn smooth by countless fingers. The gold lettering had long since faded, but he recognized it immediately. Samuel's personal Bible, the one their mother had given him. On his 16th birthday, it was in the old oak tree, Anna said, breathless with excitement. There's a hollow place where someone put it to keep it safe. Eli set down his coffee and accepted the Bible with reverence. It fell open naturally to Ecclesiastes, and he saw Samuel's handwriting in the margins, notes that hadn't been there in their youth. Pressed between the pages were wildflowers, carefully preserved, each one marked with a date. The earliest pressed flower was from 1961, just 2 years after Samuel had left the community. Did Uncle Samuel write in his Bible? Anna asked, settling beside Eli on the porch swing that creaked ominously under their combined weight. It appears so, Eli murmured, studying his brother's neat script. The notes revealed a man wrestling with faith, questioning, seeking. One passage was heavily underlined. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. Anna leaned against his arm, her small body warm and trusting. Mama used to read to me from her Bible. She said the words were like seeds that grow in your heart. The mention of Rebecca sent a familiar ache through Eli's chest. His daughter had possessed a faith that burned bright and steady, even in her final days. She'd made him promise to raise Anna in the tradition, to help her understand where she came from and who she was meant to be. "Your Uncle Samuel was a complicated man," Eli said carefully. "He loved God, but he struggled with questions that didn't have easy answers." "What kind of questions?" Eli turned a page and found more of Samuel's handwriting. "Is it wrong to want more than this? Is it sin to dream of a life beyond these boundaries? God gave me a mind that seeks knowledge. Surely he doesn't want me to bury it in the soil." "Questions about his place in the world," Eli said finally, "about whether he was living the life God intended for him." The screen door slammed, and their neighbor Esther Yoder appeared with a basket of fresh bread and preserves. She was a widow, herself somewhere in her 70s, with eyes that missed nothing and a heart that had room for everyone's troubles. "Guten Morgen," she called, climbing the steps with surprising agility. "I brought you some sourdough bread and strawberry preserves. The strawberries came from my own patch." "Danke, Esther," Eli said, grateful for both the food and the company. "You're too kind to us." Anna immediately perked up. "Mrs. Yoder, did you know Uncle Samuel when he was young?" Esther's expression grew thoughtful as she settled into the old, rocking chair that had belonged to Eli's mother. "Indeed I did, child. Your uncle was the smartest boy in our district. He could solve arithmetic problems in his head faster than most of us could write them down. Always had his nose in a book, that one." "What happened to him?" Anna asked with the direct curiosity that made adults uncomfortable. Esther glanced at Eli, seeking permission to continue. He nodded slightly. "Your uncle left us for a while when he was 19, Esther said gently. "Went to the English world to learn about business and such things. He came back about 10 years later, but he was different, quieter, more serious." Eli had never heard the full story of Samuel's return. Their father had forbidden any discussion of Samuel's time away, treating it as a chapter better left unread. When Samuel finally came home, he'd thrown himself into farming with an intensity that seemed almost desperate, as if hard work could somehow atone for whatever sins he'd committed in the outside world. "He never married," Anna observed. "No," Esther said softly. "Though there was a girl once, Sarah Byler. She waited for him while he was away, but when he came back, he said he wasn't worthy of her anymore. She married Jacob Miller the following year." After Esther left, Eli found himself studying the farm with new eyes. Samuel had lived here alone for 30 years, working land that clearly brought him more obligation than joy. The barn was falling. And down, yes, but it had been meticulously organized. Every tool had its place, every supply carefully inventoried. Even in decay, the farm showed evidence of a mind that craved order and precision. That afternoon, while Anna napped in the shade of the old maple tree, Eli explored Samuel's bedroom for the first time. He'd avoided it until now, unsure he was ready to face the intimate details of his brother's solitary life. The room was sparse. A simple bed with a quilt their mother had made, a dresser, and a desk covered with papers and books. The books surprised him. Most were about agriculture and animal husbandry, but mixed among them were volumes on philosophy, history, and economics. Several were written in English, which their father would have considered prideful. On the desk, Eli found correspondence with agricultural extension agents, records of crop yields, and detailed financial calculations that made little sense to someone who'd always lived by the simplest arithmetic. In the bottom drawer of the desk, wrapped in oiled cloth, Eli discovered a collection of newspaper clippings. They dated back decades and covered a wide range of topics: new farming techniques, market prices, economic trends. But what caught his attention were the articles about oil discoveries in Pennsylvania, some dating back to the 1970s. Samuel had been tracking the energy industry for 40 years. A knock at the front door interrupted his investigation. Through the window, Eli saw a black sedan parked in the driveway. not the sort of vehicle that typically appeared on Amish farms. He made his way downstairs, where Anna was already peering through the screen door with curious eyes. The man on the porch wore an expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase. His smile was practiced and professional. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for the property owner. I understand there's been a recent inheritance." "I am Eli Stoltzfus," he said, not opening the screen door. "This was my brother's farm." "Excellent. My name is Robert Carlyle from Keystone Land Development. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity that could be very beneficial for you and your granddaughter." Anna moved closer to Eli, sensing the tension in his voice when he replied, "We are not interested in selling. I understand your hesitation, Mr. Stoltzfus, but I think you'll want to hear what I have to offer. Your property sits on some very valuable resources. With the right development, this land could provide generational wealth for your family." The word resources sent a chill down Eli's spine. He thought of the documents Anna had found, still hidden in his bedroom drawer, unexamined since that first shocking discovery. "I said we are not interested," Eli repeated firmly. Carlyle's smile never wavered. "Perhaps we could schedule a time when you're more available to discuss the details. I'll leave my card. This is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come along often, Mr. Stoltzfus. I'd hate for you to miss out on securing your granddaughter's future." After the man left, Eli stood on the porch holding the business card, his hands trembling slightly. Anna looked up at him with those penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see far more than a 7-year-old should. "Grossdaddy," she said quietly, "why did that man make you scared?" "I'm not scared," Eli said, though they both knew it was a lie. That evening, as fireflies began their ancient dance across the meadow, Eli sat on the porch with Samuel's Bible in his lap. He'd read the same passage 3 times, but the words wouldn't stick. His mind kept returning to the documents upstairs, to Carlyle's smooth words about valuable resources, and to the growing certainty that his simple life was about to become very complicated indeed. Anna appeared in the doorway, wearing her nightgown and carrying the small cloth doll that had been her constant companion since her mother's death. "Can you tell me about Uncle Samuel?" she asked, settling beside him on the swing. Eli closed the Bible and pulled her close. "What would you like to know? Was he happy?" The question pierced him with its innocence and insight. Looking out over the farm that Samuel had maintained but never truly loved, Eli searched for an honest answer. "I think your uncle was a man who carried a heavy burden," he said finally. "But perhaps in the end he found peace in knowing that burden would not die with him." Above them the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, distant and bright, and full of mysteries that neither time nor wisdom could ever fully explain. The documents had been calling to Eli for 3 days, tucked away in his dresser drawer like a secret that refused to stay buried. Each morning he told himself he would examine them after breakfast, and each evening he found another task that seemed more pressing. But Anna's discovery of the legal papers had planted a seed of curiosity that grew stronger with each passing hour, especially after the unexpected visit from Robert Carlyle. On Wednesday morning, while Anna helped Esther Yoder collect eggs from the henhouse next door, Eli finally spread the yellow documents across Samuel's old desk. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded the first paper, a mineral rights deed dating back to 1978. The legal language was dense and unfamiliar, but certain phrases leaped out at him: subsurface rights, petroleum and natural gas, and most startling of all, in perpetuity. The second document was a geological survey from 1981, filled with technical diagrams and measurements that meant nothing to Eli, but clearly meant everything to whoever had commissioned the study. Red circles marked specific areas of the property with handwritten notes in Samuel's careful script. Primary site, 150 feet. Secondary potential, northern boundary. Contact Mitchell and Associates for updated assessment. Anna's voice drifted through the open window as she chattered to Esther about the baby chicks. The sound of her laughter, so rare since Rebecca's death, made Eli's chest tighten with protective love. Whatever these documents meant, whatever burden Samuel had carried, it now fell to him to decide how it would affect Anna's future. The third paper was the most shocking of all, an official letter from Chesapeake Energy Corporation dated just 6 months before Samuel's death. The letter outlined a preliminary offer for drilling rights, $12 million for a 10-year lease, with additional royalty payments that could total many times that amount over the life of the wells. Eli sank into Samuel's desk chair, his mind reeling. $12 million was more money than he could truly comprehend. It was more than their entire church district would see in a lifetime of farming. Yet Samuel had never responded to the letter. It remained unopened until now, sealed away with all the other secrets his brother had chosen to carry alone. An hour later, Eli found himself sitting in the cramped office of Lancaster County's Register of Deeds, watching a tired-looking clerk named Margaret pull dusty volumes from metal shelves. Anna waited patiently beside him, coloring in a notebook, while Margaret traced property lines with her finger and cross-referenced deed numbers. "Your brother was a thorough man," Margaret said, spreading a large survey map across her desk. "These mineral rights were separated from the surface rights back in 1962, but somehow your family managed to retain both. That's extremely unusual." She pointed to a section of the map covered in red hatching. "This entire area, roughly 340 acres, shows significant potential for natural gas extraction. The Marcellus Shale Formation runs directly underneath your property." "What does that mean?" Eli asked, though he suspected he already knew. "It means your brother was sitting on one of the most valuable privately held gas deposits in Pennsylvania," Margaret said matter-of-factly. "I've seen similar properties lease for enormous sums. The question is whether he ever acted on that knowledge." Anna looked up from her coloring. "Grossdaddy, why are we looking at maps of our farm? We're trying to understand something. Your Uncle Samuel left for us," Eli said carefully. Margaret pulled another file. "There's more. Your brother filed several requests for updated geological surveys over the past 15 years. He definitely knew what he had, but there's no record of him ever signing a lease agreement or accepting any offers." The drive home was silent, except for Anna's quiet humming and the clip-clop of their horses' hooves on asphalt. Eli's mind churned with implications he wasn't prepared to face. Samuel had known about the gas deposits for decades, had actively researched their value, yet had chosen to live in poverty rather than profit from them. Why? That afternoon, while Anna napped, Eli walked the boundaries of the property with new eyes. The rolling fields that had seemed like a burden just days before now felt heavy with hidden potential. Every step took him over rock formations that might contain millions of cubic feet of natural gas. The very ground beneath his feet had become alien and valuable in ways that contradicted everything he'd been taught about the proper relationship between man and land. He found himself at the old oak tree where Anna had discovered Samuel's Bible, its massive trunk scarred by lightning, but still standing after more than a century. Samuel had played here as a child, had carved his initials in the bark when he was 10 years old. The faded SS was still visible, surrounded now by decades of growth. "You knew, didn't you?" Eli said aloud, feeling foolish, but needing to voice the question that had been building all day. "You knew what this land was worth, and you chose to live like a pauper anyway." The wind rustled through the oak's leaves, but offered no answers. That evening brought another visitor, this one expected but no less troubling. Bishop Amos Byler arrived in his black buggy just as the sun touched the horizon, his weathered face grave, with the particular seriousness reserved for matters of spiritual concern. "Eli," he said, accepting a cup of coffee and settling into the kitchen chair that groaned under his substantial frame. "There's talk in the community. People are saying English men in cars have been asking questions about your property." Anna had been sent upstairs to play, but Eli suspected she was listening from the top of the steps. Children had a gift for appearing when adults most wanted privacy. "Robert Carlyle came by yesterday," Eli admitted. A land developer. I sent him away. Bishop Byler nodded approvingly. Good, but his visit troubles me. Why would the English world suddenly take interest in Samuel's old farm? Eli chose his words carefully. I believe Samuel may have discovered something about the land, something of value. What kind of value? The moment hung between them like a bridge Eli wasn't sure he wanted to cross. Once he spoke the truth aloud. To Bishop Byler, there would be no taking it back. The secret would become the community's burden, subject to their wisdom and judgment. Natural gas, Eli said finally. The land sits on top of deposits worth millions of dollars. Bishop Byler's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. He set it down slowly, his eyes never leaving Eli's face. Millions? The documents suggest much more than that. Tens of millions, perhaps more than 100 million over time. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the old wall clock and the faint sounds of Anna moving around upstairs. Bishop Byler stared out the window at the darkening fields, his mind clearly working through implications that stretched far beyond simple farming. And Samuel knew this. For many years, it appears, but he never acted on the knowledge. Why? It was the same question that had haunted Eli all day. I think he was afraid of what it would do to us, to the community, to Anna's future. Bishop Byler stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in the posture he adopted when delivering serious counsel from the pulpit. God works in mysterious ways, Eli. Perhaps he is testing us, perhaps he is providing for us, or perhaps he is warning us about the dangers of worldly wealth. What should I do? Pray. Study Scripture. Seek the counsel of elders who have walked this path longer than either of us. The bishop turned back to face him. But remember, this decision will affect not just you and Anna, but our entire community. The English world has a way of changing everything it touches. After Bishop Byler left, Eli climbed the stairs to find Anna sitting on her bed, surrounded by crayons and paper. She'd drawn a picture of the farm, the house, the barn, the oak tree, and two stick figures that clearly represented him and her. "Is everything all right, Grossdaddy?" she asked, looking up with those penetrating blue eyes. Eli sat on the edge of her bed and studied her drawing. In her child's perspective, the farm looked peaceful and perfect, unmarked by the complexity of adult concerns. "Anna," he said gently, "if we discovered that Uncle Samuel had left us a great deal of money, what do you think we should do with it?" She considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. Would it help people? It could help many people, but it might also change our lives in ways we can't predict. Mama always said that money isn't bad by itself, but loving money more than people is what makes trouble. Anna picked up a green crayon and added grass around the stick figures. "Do you think Uncle Samuel was afraid of loving money too much?" From the mouth of a 7-year-old came wisdom that cut straight to the heart of the matter. Samuel had discovered wealth beyond imagination, but his Amish upbringing had taught him that earthly riches were a dangerous temptation. So he'd chosen poverty over plenty, isolation over integration, carrying his burden alone rather than risk corrupting the community he loved. "I think," Eli said slowly, "your uncle was trying to protect us from something he wasn't sure we could handle." Anna nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "But now, we have to decide if we're strong enough to handle it ourselves." That night, long after Anna had fallen asleep, Eli sat in Samuel's chair, reading his brother's Bible by lamplight. The pressed flowers caught the golden glow, wildflowers, roses, even a sprig of wheat from some long-ago harvest. Each one marked a moment when Samuel had found beauty worth preserving, hope worth remembering. On the final page, written in ink that had faded to brown, Eli found words that Samuel had never shared with anyone. "The treasure belongs to whoever can use it wisely. I pray that person will be wiser than I have been." Outside, the wind moved through the grass with a sound like whispered prayers, and the weight of decision settled on Eli's shoulders like a mantle he wasn't sure he was ready to wear. The discovery. came 3 days after Bishop Byler's visit, hidden behind a loose board in Samuel's bedroom closet. Anna had been helping Eli sort through Samuel's belongings when her small fingers found the gap in the wood paneling. What she pulled out was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Samuel's careful handwriting dating back more than 30 years. Eli sat on Samuel's bed with Anna beside him, reading entries that revealed a brother he'd never truly known. The earliest entry was dated October 15th, 1991. The survey results came back today. Miller was right. There's enough gas under this land to supply Philadelphia for a decade. I should be celebrating, but all I feel is dread. Uncle Samuel wrote, like Mama did in her diary, Anna observed, tracing the faded ink with her finger. She said writing helped her talk to God when praying felt too hard. The journal entries painted a picture of a man tormented by knowledge he couldn't share. Samuel had discovered the gas deposits shortly after returning from his 10-year absence. In the English world, where he'd learned enough about business and geology to understand what he'd inherited. But instead of seeing opportunity, he'd seen destruction. March 3rd, 1992, Eli read aloud. Watch the Yoder farm today as the English crews finish their drilling operation. In 6 months, they've turned 80 acres of prime farmland into an industrial site. Abraham Yoder has enough money to buy 10 farms now, but his children speak more English than Dutch, and his youngest son talks of moving to Pittsburgh. The gas made him rich. But did it make him happy? Anna shifted closer to Eli. Was Uncle Samuel afraid the same thing would happen to us? It seems that way. Eli turned the page and found an entry that made his breath catch. April 10th, 1995. Rebecca visited today with baby Anna. My niece glowed with new motherhood, and the baby is perfect. Blonde hair like sunlight and eyes that see everything. Rebecca asked if I was lonely living here alone, and I almost told her the truth, that I stay to guard a secret that could change everything for our family. But she looked so happy, so content with her simple life. How could I burden her with knowledge that might destroy that peace? The weight of Samuel's sacrifice became clearer with each entry. He'd known about Anna since her birth, had watched her grow from a distance, and had chosen his isolation partly to protect her future. The journal revealed that he'd been setting aside small amounts of money for years, not from the gas rights, but from careful farming and frugal living, creating a modest college fund that he'd never mentioned to anyone. May 15th, 1998. Another entry read, saw Eli at the Byler wedding today. We nodded to each other across the barn, but didn't speak. 40 years of silence between us, and I don't know how to bridge it. He thinks I'm stubborn and prideful. He's not wrong. But if he knew what I know, would he understand why I can't come home to the family? Some secrets are too dangerous to share, even with the people you love most. Anna looked up at Eli with those perceptive eyes. He was protecting you too, wasn't he? That's why he stayed away from family dinners and church socials. It appears so. Eli's voice was thick with emotion. All those years of thinking Samuel was too proud to rejoin the family, when in truth he'd been sacrificing his own happiness to preserve theirs. The most revealing entries came from recent years, as Samuel had aged and begun to worry about what would happen to his secret after his death. January 8th, 2018, Eli read silently, then decided Anna was old enough to hear the truth. Rebecca's cancer is back. She tries to hide it, but I can see death in her eyes. She's worried about Anna, about who will care for her if the worst happens. I want to tell her that I've been preparing for this day, that the land will provide for Anna's future in ways she can't imagine. But the burden must pass to Eli when the time comes. He's the only one I trust to make the right choice. Uncle Samuel was thinking about me even when Mama was sick. Anna's voice was small and wondering. He thought about you every day, Eli confirmed, turning to an entry from just months before Samuel's death. Anna is 7 now, bright as her mother, but with a courage Rebecca never had. Yesterday I watched her climb the oak tree to rescue a kitten that had gotten stuck. She didn't hesitate, didn't call for help, just solved the problem with the tools God gave her. If anyone can handle the truth about this inheritance, it might be that little girl. She has the wisdom to see beyond the money to what really matters. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. James Mitchell, a geologist from Penn State, arrived in a dusty pickup truck loaded with surveying equipment. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime spent examining the Earth's secrets. "I was sorry to hear about Samuel's passing," Dr. Mitchell said as they sat on the front porch. "He was one of the most knowledgeable landowners I ever worked with. Most folks just wanted to know how much money they could make. Samuel wanted to understand the environmental impact, the long-term consequences, the effect on groundwater systems. You worked with my brother. For 20 years, off and on, he commissioned geological studies, environmental assessments, even a few experimental test wells. Always paid cash, always insisted on the most thorough analysis possible." Dr. Mitchell pulled out a thick folder. "He asked me to deliver these to his heir if anything happened to him." The folder contained detailed reports that made the earlier documents look simple by comparison. Environmental impact studies, groundwater analysis, projected extraction rates, and economic models that stretched out 50 years into the future. Samuel had approached the gas deposits with the thoroughness of a scientist and the caution of a man who understood that actions have consequences. "Your brother was particularly concerned about hydraulic fracturing," Dr. Mitchell explained. "He wanted to know if it was possible to extract the gas without contaminating the water supply or disrupting the surrounding farms." "Is it possible? With the right technology and environmental controls? Yes. It's expensive, but it can be done responsibly." Samuel was investigating some of the newer extraction methods, ones that minimize surface disruption and protect groundwater. Anna had been listening quietly, and now she spoke up. "Did Uncle Samuel think it was okay to take the gas out of the ground?" Dr. Mitchell smiled at her directness. "Your uncle asked me that same question many times. The way I see it, the gas is there whether we use it or not. The question is whether we can use it in a way that respects the land and the people who depend on it." That evening, as Eli tucked Anna into bed, she asked the question he'd been dreading. "Grostadi, are we going to let them take the gas?" "I don't know yet," Eli answered honestly. "It's a big decision, and I want to make sure we choose wisely. Can we ask God what Uncle Samuel would want us to do?" They knelt together beside her bed, and Anna's simple prayer cut through all the complexity of geological surveys and environmental studies. "Dear God, please help us know what Uncle Samuel would want. Help us use his gift in a way that would make him proud and keep our family safe. And if we're supposed to help other people with the money, please show us how. Amen." As Eli kissed her goodnight, Anna added sleepily, "I think Uncle Samuel left us the journal, so we'd know he wasn't just leaving us money. He was leaving us his love too." Alone in the kitchen, Eli continued reading Samuel's journal by lamplight, each entry revealing new layers of his brother's sacrifice and wisdom. The final entry, written just weeks before Samuel's death, contained a truth that changed everything. "I've spent 30 years being afraid of this wealth, but maybe fear was the wrong response. Maybe the real question isn't whether we deserve this blessing, but whether we're brave enough to use it well." The small wooden box sat on Anna's dresser like a silent guardian, painted white with tiny pink roses that had faded with time. It had belonged to her mother, Rebecca, and contained the precious remnants of a life cut too short. A pressed flower from her wedding bouquet, a lock of Anna's baby hair tied with blue ribbon, and a letter she'd written to Anna on her first birthday, meant to be opened when Anna turned 18. Eli found Anna sitting cross-legged on her bedroom floor one rainy morning, the box's contents spread carefully around her like pieces of a puzzle she was trying to solve. The sight stopped him in the doorway. This small girl surrounded by memories, trying to make sense of loss that even adults struggled to understand. "Grossdaddy," Anna said without looking up, "do you think Mama knew about Uncle Samuel's secret?" The question caught Eli off guard. He entered the room and settled on the floor beside her, his old joints protesting the movement. "What makes you ask that?" Anna held up a photograph, Rebecca at age 10, standing next to Samuel by the old oak tree. Both were smiling, and Samuel's hand rested protectively on Rebecca's shoulder. "Look at how Uncle Samuel is looking at Mama in this picture, like he's already thinking about taking care of her." Eli studied the photograph, seeing details that had escaped his notice before. Samuel's expression held a tenderness that contradicted the distant Uncle Eli remembered. In the background, he could make out surveying stakes that must have marked the early geological studies. "Your mama was always special to Samuel," Eli said carefully. "She had a way of seeing the good in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves." Anna picked up another item from the box, a small carved wooden horse no bigger than her thumb. "Mama said Uncle Samuel made this for me when I was born. She kept it in here with her most precious things. The carving was exquisite, every detail perfect, despite its tiny size." Samuel had possessed artistic talents that Eli had forgotten about, skills their father had discouraged as impractical. Yet here was evidence that Samuel had poured love into creating something beautiful for his great niece, even while maintaining his distance from the family. He made it from wood, from the oak tree, Anna continued, turning the horse to catch the morning light. "Mama told me that Uncle Samuel said every piece of the farm should be part of my life, even if I couldn't live there." The revelation hit Eli like a physical blow. Samuel had been thinking about Anna's connection to the land from the moment she was born, planning for a future that included her inheritance of more than just soil and timber. Every decision Samuel had made, the isolation, the secrecy, the careful preservation of the gas rights, had been with Anna in mind. A knock at the front door interrupted his thoughts. Through the window, Eli saw another unfamiliar car. This one bearing government license plates. His stomach tightened with the familiar dread that had become his constant companion since the document's discovery. The visitor was a woman in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She introduced herself as Linda Hartwell from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. "I'm conducting a routine survey of properties in this area that may be affected by proposed energy development," she explained, consulting a tablet computer. "There's been significant interest from drilling companies, and we want to ensure landowners understand their rights and responsibilities." Eli invited her to sit on the porch, keeping Anna close beside him. The morning rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sweet with the scent of wet earth. "Has your family received any offers from energy companies?" Linda asked. "One company has expressed interest," Eli said carefully. "Keystone Land Development?" Linda's expression grew serious. "Mr. Stoltzfus, I need to warn you about that company. They're not actually an energy company, they're land speculators. They buy mineral rights cheap and then sell them to the highest bidder, often without regard for environmental protections or fair compensation to landowners." Anna looked up at Eli with concern. "Are they the bad kind of people, Grossdaddy?" "Not bad, necessarily," Linda said gently. "But they're more interested in quick profits than in doing what's right for the land or the people who live on it." She pulled out a folder filled with official documents. "If you're considering any kind of energy development, I'd recommend working directly with established companies that have good environmental records. And make sure you have independent legal counsel review any contracts." After Linda left, Eli found himself walking the property boundaries with new awareness. Every fence post, every stone wall, every ancient tree represented not just the accumulated work of generations, but a stewardship that would soon pass entirely to Anna. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier with each step, he discovered. Anna at the old cemetery behind the farmhouse, where 5 generations of Stoltzfus ancestors rested under weathered headstones. She was kneeling beside the newest grave, Samuel's simple marker, with its plain inscription, Samuel Stoltzfus, 1954-2023. He trusted in the Lord. "I've been telling Uncle Samuel about the journal and the gas and everything," Anna said as Eli approached. "I think he's happy that we know the truth now. What else have you been telling him? That I'm not afraid of the money like he was, and that I think maybe God put it there for a reason." Anna stood and brushed grass from her knees. "Mama always said that when God gives you talents, you're supposed to use them to help people. Maybe the gas is like a talent that got buried in the ground." The insight was so profound that Eli had to sit down on the old stone bench their grandfather had placed among the graves. A 7-year-old child had grasped something that had eluded both Samuel and himself, that perhaps the wealth wasn't a temptation to be feared, but a responsibility to be embraced. "What kind of help do you think people need?" Eli asked. Anna considered this seriously. "Mrs. Yoder's roof leaks when it rains hard, and the miller's little boy needs special medicine that costs a lot of money. And remember when the tornado hit the Lap farm last year? They had to rebuild everything by themselves because their insurance wouldn't pay." Each example she cited represented real need in their community, needs that had gone unmet, not from lack of caring, but from lack of resources. The Amish tradition of mutual aid was strong, but it had its limits. Medical bills, natural disasters, and the increasing costs of maintaining traditional farming practices in a modern economy created burdens that community barn raisings couldn't always address. "Uncle Samuel wrote in his journal about wanting to help people," Anna continued, "but I think he was afraid that having too much money would make us not Amish anymore. What do you think?" "I think being Amish is about what's in your heart, not how much money you have in the bank." Anna walked to Samuel's grave and placed her small hand on the headstone. "Uncle Samuel had more money than anyone, but he still lived like we do. He still worked hard and helped his neighbors and trusted in God." That evening, as they prepared supper together, Anna asked a question that went to the heart of everything. "Grossdaddy, if we use some of the money to help people, but we still live in the same house and drive the same buggy and go to the same church, are we still the same people?" Eli paused in his stirring of the soup, struck by the elegant simplicity of her logic. The money didn't have to change who they were. It could simply expand their ability to live out their values on a larger scale. "I think," he said slowly, "your mama would be very proud of the woman you're growing up to be." Anna smiled and continued, setting the table, humming a hymn their church sang every Sunday. Outside, the evening light painted the fields gold, and for the first time since inheriting the farm, Eli felt something that might have been peace beginning to take root in his heart. The Lancaster County Historical Society occupied a stately brick building that had once served as a bank, its high ceilings and polished floors echoing with the footsteps of visitors seeking connection to the past. Eli had never imagined he would find himself here, but Anna's questions about their family's history had sent him searching for answers that might help him understand Samuel's burden. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, the Society's elderly archivist, spread the original land grant across a mahogany table with the reverence of someone handling scripture. The document, dated 1847, bore the official seal of Pennsylvania and granted 400 acres to Johann Stoltzfus, Eli's great-great-grandfather, for the sum of $800. "Your ancestor was remarkably foresighted," Mrs. Patterson observed, adjusting her wire-rimmed spectacles. Most farmers of that era sold their mineral rights to railroad companies or mining interests for quick cash. But Johann specifically retained all subsurface rights in perpetuity. That was almost unheard of. Anna leaned forward, studying the elaborate script of the original deed. "What does in perpetuity mean?" "Forever," Mrs. Patterson explained kindly. "Your great-great-great-grandfather made sure that everything under the ground would belong to his family for all time." Eli traced the boundaries, marked on the hand-drawn map that accompanied the deed. The property had been larger then, 450 acres, that had been gradually reduced through sales and divisions over the generations. But the core 340 acres that Samuel had inherited remained intact, along with all the mineral rights Johann had so carefully preserved. "There's more," Mrs. Patterson said, producing a folder of correspondence. Johann wrote extensively to his brother in Ohio about his decision to keep the mineral rights. He believed the land held secrets that future generations would need. The letter, translated from Pennsylvania Dutch, revealed a man of remarkable vision. "Brother, the English tell me I am foolish to keep rights to what lies beneath the soil when I could have money in hand today. But I have seen what happens to families who sell their inheritance for temporary gain. The land will provide for our children's children in ways we cannot imagine. What God has placed in the earth, he has placed there for a purpose." Anna looked up at Eli with wonder. "He was thinking about us even back then." "It appears so," Eli said, feeling the weight of 5 generations of stewardship settling on his shoulders. The drive home took them through the heart of Amish country, past farms that had remained largely unchanged for decades. But Eli noticed things he'd never seen before, or perhaps had chosen not to see. The Lapp farm showed signs of struggle, with equipment that should have been replaced years ago and fields that needed proper drainage. The Yoder place had a new English-style house beside the old farmhouse, evidence of sons who'd chosen different paths. "Times are changing," Eli murmured, more to himself than to Anna. "Is that bad?" Anna asked. "Not necessarily, but change brings choices, and choices have consequences." That afternoon brought another visitor, though this one was welcomed with genuine warmth. Daniel Miller, Eli's cousin and a successful furniture maker, arrived with his wife Sarah, bearing fresh bread and troubling news. "Eli," Daniel said as they sat around the kitchen table, "there's talk at the lumber yard about energy companies buying up land all through the county. The English are offering prices that make hard-working men dizzy with possibility." Sarah nodded. Gravely, 3 families in our district have already signed leases. The money is good, but the disruption, the trucks, the noise, the changes to the landscape, it's affecting the whole community. Anna listened quietly, absorbing the adult conversation with the focused attention she brought to everything important. When Sarah mentioned the Byler family's struggles with medical bills for their youngest son's surgery, Anna glanced meaningfully at Eli. "What do you think Samuel would have advised?" Eli asked carefully. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Samuel was always the smartest of us, even as children. He saw patterns and possibilities that escaped the rest of us. If Samuel had discovered something valuable on his land, he would have found a way to use it that honored our traditions while helping our people." After his cousins left, Eli found himself in Samuel's study again, reading through correspondence he'd initially overlooked. Among the agricultural reports and geological surveys, he discovered letters from Amish communities across the country: Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, even as far away as Montana and Colorado. Samuel had been quietly corresponding with bishops and community leaders, sharing information about land management and sustainable farming practices. One letter particularly caught his attention, from Bishop Abraham Troyer in Holmes County, Ohio. "Brother Samuel, your insights into balancing traditional values with modern economic pressures have been invaluable to our community. The young families here face challenges our fathers never imagined: rising land costs, medical expenses that exceed our mutual aid funds, and pressure to abandon farming for English jobs. Your suggestions about community investment cooperatives have helped several families stay on their land. May God continue to bless your wisdom." The pattern became clear as Eli read through dozens of similar letters. Samuel hadn't been isolated in his concerns. He'd been part of a quiet network of Amish leaders grappling with the same questions about how to preserve their way of life in an increasingly expensive and complicated world. Anna appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I thought you might be getting cold in here," she said, settling into the chair beside Samuel's desk. "Anna," Eli said, accepting the warm cup gratefully, "how do you think we could help families like the Byler's without making them feel like charity cases?" She considered this seriously, blowing on her hot chocolate to cool it. "Maybe we could do it the way Uncle Samuel did. Quietly, so people think it's just good fortune instead of help from us." The wisdom of her suggestion struck Eli immediately. The Amish tradition of mutual aid worked precisely because it preserved dignity, barn raisings, harvest help, and community support that felt like neighborly cooperation rather than charity. Samuel had understood this principle and had been developing ways to extend it beyond the traditional boundaries. "What if we could help whole communities at once?" Anna continued. What if we could help build better schools, or make sure all the families have good wells that don't go dry in summer? Her vision was larger and more generous than anything Eli had imagined. Instead of thinking about individual needs, she was considering systemic improvements that would benefit everyone, while preserving the community's independence and self-reliance. That evening, as Anna worked on her school lessons at the kitchen table, Eli drafted his first letter to Bishop Troyer in Ohio. He wrote carefully, sharing the bare outlines of his situation without revealing specifics, asking for counsel about stewardship and community responsibility. "Grosdadi," Anna said, looking up from her arithmetic, "do you think God put the gas under our land because he knew Uncle Samuel would be wise enough not to waste it, and we would be brave enough to use it right?" The question encapsulated everything. Eli had been struggling to understand. Perhaps the wealth wasn't a test or a temptation. Perhaps it was a tool placed in the hands of people who had been prepared by generations of faith and community service to use it well. "I'm beginning to think you might be right," Eli said, sealing the letter that would begin a correspondence spanning multiple Amish communities and ultimately shaping the future of Anna's inheritance. Outside, the first frost of autumn painted the windows with delicate patterns, and the land that had kept its secrets for so long seemed to whisper promises of the good that was yet to come. The quilting circle met every Thursday evening in the basement of the Byler farmhouse, where 20 women from across their district gathered to stitch together more than fabric. They wove the threads that held their community together. Eli had never attended such a gathering, but when the women decided to create a quilt for Anna's bed, Esther Yoder insisted he bring Anna to see the work in progress. The basement hummed with quiet conversation and the soft sound of needles pulling thread through cotton. Anna's eyes widened as she saw the quilt taking shape, a pattern called wedding ring, made from scraps donated by each family in the district. Every piece of fabric told a story: blue from Sarah Miller's wedding dress, green from the curtains in the Lapp farmhouse, yellow from a baby blanket that had welcomed 3 generations of Yoder children. "Each ring represents a family," explained Martha Byler, the bishop's wife, as Anna traced the interlocking circles with her finger. "When you wrap yourself in this quilt, you'll be surrounded by the love of everyone who cares about you." Anna's voice was soft with wonder. "It's like the whole community is giving me a hug." Eli watched the women work, marveling at their skill and the easy way they shared news, concerns, and quiet wisdom. He learned that the Hostetler's dairy barn needed a new roof before winter, that young Mary Zook was struggling to afford the medicine for her diabetic son, and that the one-room schoolhouse where Anna would attend needed new textbooks and supplies. As the evening progressed, Eli began to understand something Samuel had grasped long before him. These women weren't just making a quilt, they were mapping the needs of their community, identifying problems and solutions with the same careful attention they brought to their stitching. Every conversation revealed another family facing challenges that strained the traditional mutual aid system. "Times aren't what they used to be," admitted Rachel Hostetler, whose husband had been forced to take a job in Lancaster to make ends meet. The cost of everything keeps rising: feed, equipment, medical care. The young families especially are struggling to stay on their land. Anna looked up at Eli with those perceptive eyes, and he knew she was thinking the same thing he was. The wealth sitting beneath their farm could address every need these women had mentioned, and dozens more besides. After they returned home, Anna helped Eli search through more of Samuel's correspondence. They discovered letters from bishops in 7 different states, all describing similar challenges. Rising healthcare costs were forcing Amish families to seek employment outside their communities. Young people were leaving farming because they couldn't afford to buy land. Traditional industries like furniture making and quilting were competing with mass-produced goods. But Samuel's letters also revealed something else. He'd been developing solutions. "Look at this," Eli said, showing Anna a letter from Bishop Troyer, dated just 6 months before Samuel's death. Samuel had been working with communities in Ohio to create what he called stewardship cooperatives, groups that pooled resources to help young families buy land and start sustainable businesses. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of individual charity that might create dependence, the cooperatives provided low-interest loans and business mentoring that preserved dignity while building long-term stability. Samuel had helped fund 3 such cooperatives already, using money from careful investments rather than the gas rights. He was practicing, Anna said with sudden insight. Uncle Samuel was learning how to help people the right way before he told us about the big secret. That night brought an unwelcome visitor. Robert Carlyle returned, this time accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Marcus Webb from Consolidated Energy Partners. They arrived after dark, their headlights sweeping across the farmhouse like searchlights. Eli met them on the porch, not inviting them inside. Anna remained in the kitchen, but he could see her, shadow by the window. "Mr. Stoltzfus," Carlyle began with his practiced smile, "I hope you've had time to reconsider our previous conversation. Mr. Webb here represents some very serious investors who are prepared to make you an offer you really should hear." Webb stepped forward, his voice smooth and confident. "We're prepared to offer $15 million for a 20-year lease on your mineral rights, plus 20% royalties on all extracted resources. Based on our geological surveys, you could be looking at total compensation exceeding $50 million. The numbers were staggering, but Eli noticed what they didn't say. What about environmental protections, community impact studies, long-term restoration plans? Webb's smile faltered slightly. "Those details can be worked out during the development phase. Right now, we're focused on getting you the best possible financial package." "I need time to consider this properly," Eli said. "Of course," Carlyle said quickly, "but I should mention that we have offers pending on several other properties in the area. If we can't reach an agreement with you, we may need to pursue alternative development strategies that could affect your property's value." After they left, Eli found Anna sitting at the kitchen table with Samuel's journal open before her. "They're trying to scare you," she said without looking up. "Uncle Samuel wrote about people like that. He said they use fear to make people make bad decisions quickly." Eli read the entry she'd found. March 15th, 2019, another group of speculators came by today, pressing for quick decisions and hinting at dire consequences if I don't cooperate. They don't understand that I've been thinking about this decision for 30 years. Fear is their primary tool, but fear is also the enemy of wisdom. The right choice is rarely the fast choice. The next morning brought better news. A letter arrived from Bishop Troyer, responding to Eli's careful inquiry about community stewardship. The bishop wrote with warmth and understanding, "Brother Eli, your situation is not unique, though few face it on such a scale. I have seen communities strengthened by wise stewardship and destroyed by poorly managed wealth. The key is always to remember that we are caretakers, not owners, of whatever God places in our hands." The letter went on to describe successful community development projects, schools, medical clinics, sustainable farming initiatives, all funded through careful, prayerful use of unexpected resources. Bishop Troyer invited Eli to visit Ohio to see these projects firsthand. Anna was feeding the chickens when Eli found her to share the letter. She listened thoughtfully, scattering corn with practiced movements. "Gross, Daddy," she said finally. "I think Uncle Samuel was planning for us to visit these places. Look." She pulled a folded paper from her apron pocket. A train schedule to Ohio that she'd found tucked inside Samuel's Bible. The schedule was dated just weeks before Samuel's death, with notes in his handwriting about arrival times and connections. He'd been planning a trip he would never take, perhaps hoping to bring Eli and Anna to see the work he'd been secretly supporting. "He was going to show us how to do it right," Anna continued. "He spent all those years learning and practicing, and then he was going to teach us." That evening, as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance across the meadow, Anna asked the question that had been building in both their minds. "When do we go to Ohio?" Eli looked at this remarkable child who had inherited not only Samuel's wisdom, but also his courage. The quilt pieces scattered around their community represented needs that could be met, dreams that could be fulfilled, and a way of life that could be preserved and strengthened. "Next week," he said, surprising himself, with the certainty in his voice. "It's time we learned what your Uncle Samuel wanted us to know." The fireflies blinked their ancient code across the darkness, and the land that had kept its secrets for so long seemed to pulse with anticipation for the good that was finally ready to begin. The key was small and brass, unremarkable, except for the number 247 etched into its surface. Anna found it wrapped in tissue paper inside Samuel's shaving kit, tucked behind a bottle of bay rum aftershave that still carried his scent. She brought it to Eli with the same careful reverence she'd shown Samuel's Bible and journal. "It's a safety deposit box key," Eli realized, turning the small piece of metal over in his palm. "But which bank?" The answer came in Samuel's journal, in an entry Anna discovered while Eli packed for their planned trip to Ohio. April 3rd, 2020, moved. The important documents to First National in Lancaster. "If something happens to me, Eli will need proof of what I've been doing all these years. The foundation papers are in box 247, along with the investment records and the letter I could never bring myself to give him." The First National Bank of Lancaster occupied a grand limestone building that had served the community for over a century. The vault lay behind steel doors, thick enough to stop a cannonball, its walls lined with hundreds of safety deposit boxes that held the secrets and treasures of generations. Mrs. Dorothy Chen, the bank manager, led them through the verification process with professional courtesy tinged with curiosity. It wasn't every day that an Amish man and his young granddaughter requested access to a box that had remained unopened for 3 years. "Your brother was one of our most methodical customers," Mrs. Chen mentioned as she inserted her key alongside Eli's. "He visited regularly, always bringing documents to store or review. Very organized, very thorough." The safety deposit box was larger than Eli had expected, filled with manila folders organized with Samuel's characteristic precision. But it was the sealed envelope on top, marked "For Eli to be opened first," in Samuel's careful script. That made his hands tremble. Anna pressed close to his side as he opened the envelope, revealing several pages of Samuel's handwriting dated just 2 months before his death. "My dear brother, if you are reading this, then God has called me home, and the burden I have carried for 30 years has passed to you. I pray you will find it in your heart to forgive me for the years of silence between us, and to understand that my distance was born of love, not pride. You always thought I left our family because I rejected our way of life. The truth is more complicated. I left because I discovered something that could have destroyed everything we held sacred, and I returned because I realized it could also be the key to preserving it for generations to come. In the winter of 1979, while you were courting your dear Martha and planning your future, I was working with a geological survey team that had been hired to assess farmland throughout Lancaster County. What we discovered beneath our property was staggering. Natural gas deposits worth more money than our entire community had ever seen. The knowledge terrified me. I spent 10 years in the English world learning about business, investments, and the responsible management of wealth. I watched families torn apart by sudden riches and communities destroyed by industrial development. I also saw examples of how great resources could be stewarded wisely to strengthen rather than corrupt. When I returned home in 1989, I brought with me a plan, not to become wealthy, but to become a faithful steward of an incredible responsibility. I have spent the last 30 years learning how to manage this blessing without letting it manage me. The documents in this box will show you what I have built. The Samuel Stoltzfus Foundation has been operating quietly since 1995, funded by careful investments rather than the gas rights themselves. We have helped purchase farmland for young families, funded medical treatments that exceeded community resources, and supported sustainable agriculture initiatives across 7 states. But this is only the beginning of what could be accomplished. The full development of our gas reserves, done responsibly with proper environmental safeguards, could fund community development projects that would strengthen Amish communities nationwide for generations. I never married because I feared passing this burden to a wife and children. But watching little Anna grow, seeing her wisdom and courage even as a small child, I believe God may have chosen her to be the one who finally fulfills the potential of this inheritance. The choice is yours, dear brother. You can sell the rights and live comfortably. You can lease them and become wealthy, or you can follow the path I have prepared, using them to serve something greater than ourselves. Whatever you decide, know that you have my love and my trust. Your brother, Samuel. P.S. The man who will try to prevent you from following this path is Harold Brennan. We were partners briefly in the 1980s before I realized his vision was incompatible with our values. He has never forgotten what he believes he is owed. Eli's hands shook as he set the letter aside. Anna leaned against him, her small hand on his arm providing comfort he desperately needed. He wasn't hiding from us, Anna said quietly. He was protecting us until we were ready. The folders in the box revealed the scope of Samuel's quiet revolution. Financial records showed a foundation with assets exceeding $20 million, all generated through careful investments of the small amount Samuel had earned from a traditional farming and his part-time work as a geological consultant. Bank statements documented hundreds of grants and loans to Amish families and communities, each one carefully structured to preserve dignity while providing crucial support. But the most shocking discovery was a thick folder labeled Development Plans. Inside were detailed environmental impact studies, architectural drawings for community centers and schools, and a comprehensive 50-year plan for responsible resource extraction that would fund social programs while protecting the land and water for future generations. Samuel hadn't just been sitting on a fortune, he'd been planning how to use it to transform Amish communities across America. "Look at this," Anna said, pulling out a hand-drawn map that showed their farm at the center of a network spanning from Pennsylvania to Montana. Red lines connected Amish settlements, with notes about specific needs. Medical clinic needed. Homes. County, Land Purchase Fund, Elkhart County. Sustainable Technology Research, Adams County. Mrs. Chen had been waiting patiently while they explored the box's contents. Now she cleared her throat gently. "I should mention that we've had several inquiries about Mr. Samuel's accounts over the past few months. A gentleman named Harold Brennan has been quite persistent about claiming some connection to your brother's business affairs." The name from Samuel's letter hit Eli like a physical blow. "What kind of inquiries?" He claims your brother owed him money from a business partnership decades ago. He's been pressuring us to freeze the accounts pending legal resolution. Mrs. Chen's professional manner couldn't quite hide her distaste. We've refused, of course, since he has no legal standing, but he's become quite insistent. Anna tugged on Eli's sleeve. Is that the bad man Uncle Samuel was worried about? Before Eli could answer, Mrs. Chen's assistant appeared at the vault door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman here demanding to speak with the Stoltzfus family. He says it's urgent legal business. Through the bank's front windows, Eli could see a black sedan parked outside. Not the same one that had brought Carlyle and Webb, but similar enough to send a chill down his spine. A tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit paced on the sidewalk, speaking animatedly into a cell phone. That's Harold Brennan, Mrs. Chen confirmed quietly. He must have been watching the bank. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Brennan hadn't just been Samuel's former business partner. He'd been tracking the Foundation's activities for years, waiting for Samuel's death to make his move. The sudden appearance of land speculators, the pressure tactics, the threats about alternative development strategies, it was all part of a coordinated effort to force Eli into a quick sale before he could understand the full scope of Samuel's vision. We need to leave, Eli said, hastily gathering the documents back into the box. There's a back exit through the alley, Mrs. Chen offered, and Mr. Stoltzfus, I'd recommend getting legal counsel immediately. Men like Brennan don't make empty threats. As they slipped out the bank's rear entrance with the safety deposit box contents secured in a canvas bag, Anna looked up at Eli with determination rather than fear. Uncle Samuel knew this would happen, she said. That's why he prepared everything so carefully. He knew we'd have to fight for it. Walking quickly toward their buggy parked 3 blocks away, Eli felt the weight of true understanding settling on his shoulders. The inheritance wasn't just money or land. It was a vision of community transformation that threatened powerful interests who preferred to keep Amish families vulnerable and dependent. Samuel had spent 30 years building not just wealth, but the knowledge and connections needed to use that wealth wisely. Now Eli and Anna would have to prove themselves worthy of that preparation and strong enough to defend it against those who would twist it to their own purposes. The game had changed completely, and they were no longer simply deciding how to handle an unexpected inheritance. They were fighting for the future of their entire way of life. The train to Ohio departed Lancaster at dawn, carrying Eli and Anna away from the escalating pressure and toward the answers Samuel had intended them to find. As the Pennsylvania countryside rolled past their window, Eli opened the final envelope from Samuel's safety deposit box, one he hadn't dared read in the bank's vault. The letter was addressed to both of them. For Eli and Anna, my final instructions. My dear brother and precious Anna, if you are reading this on the train to Ohio, then you have discovered not only the Foundation's work, but also Harold Brennan's interference. I'm not surprised. Harold has been watching and waiting for 30 years, convinced that I cheated him out of his rightful share of our discovery. The truth is more complex. Harold and I were partners in 1983 when we first confirmed the gas deposits. Value. But where I saw responsibility, he saw opportunity. He wanted to lease the land immediately to the highest bidder, with no regard for environmental impact or community consequences. When I refused, he threatened to expose our discovery, to force my hand. That threat drove me into deeper isolation and taught me that this secret could be used as a weapon against our people. Harold believes he is entitled to half of everything because he helped fund the initial geological surveys. What he doesn't know is that I have been quietly repaying that debt with interest for 20 years through anonymous contributions to his various business ventures. He is wealthier because of my stewardship, though he doesn't realize it, but legal facts matter less than Harold's desperation. His other investments have failed, and he needs this windfall to avoid bankruptcy. He will use every tool at his disposal. legal. Pressure, community manipulation, threats against your safety to force you to sell quickly and quietly. You must not face him alone. Bishop Troyer in Ohio has been preparing for this day as carefully as I have. The communities you will visit have agreed to stand with you, not because they want your money, but because they understand that your fight is their fight. If Harold can steal this inheritance through intimidation and legal manipulation, no Amish community anywhere will be safe from similar predation. The enclosed documents give you everything you need: proof of Harold's debt repayment, evidence of his failed schemes, and legal standing to protect the Foundation's work. But more importantly, you will find allies who understand that some battles must be fought to preserve everything we hold dear. Trust Anna's wisdom. She sees clearly what adults often miss. Trust Bishop Troyer's guidance. He has shepherded communities through challenges I never imagined. And trust that God has prepared you both for this moment, even when the preparation felt like loss and loneliness. The Foundation's future depends not on legal victories, but on moral courage. Show our people that wealth can serve faith rather than corrupt it, and you will have honored not only my memory, but our ancestors' vision. With all my love and faith in your strength, Samuel. Anna had been reading along, her lips moving silently with the more difficult words. When Eli finished, she was quiet for a long time, watching farms and forests stream past the train window. "Grossdaddy," she finally said, "Uncle Samuel made us into soldiers without telling us, didn't he?" The insight pierced him with its accuracy. Samuel had indeed been preparing them for battle, not through weapons training, but through wisdom, community connections, and moral clarity. Every story he'd shared, every document he'd preserved, every relationship he'd cultivated, had been part of an elaborate preparation for the confrontation they now faced. Holmes County, Ohio, revealed itself as a thriving example of what Amish communities could become with proper resources and careful planning. Bishop Abraham Troyer met them at the small train station in Millersburg, his weathered face creased with genuine warmth and obvious concern. "Brother Eli, young Anna," he said, embracing them both. "Samuel spoke of you often in his letters. I feel I know you already." The bishop's buggy carried them through a landscape that seemed familiar yet somehow enhanced. The farms were traditional in appearance, but showed signs of subtle improvements. Solar panels designed to look like traditional roofing, wind pumps that generated both water pressure and electricity, barns built with modern materials but classical designs. "This is what Samuel helped us build," Bishop Troyer explained, as they passed a one-room schoolhouse that was clearly new despite its traditional appearance. Education that honors our values while preparing our children for the challenges they'll face. The medical clinic was the most impressive sight, a building that looked like a traditional Amish meeting house from the outside, but contained modern equipment capable of handling everything from routine checkups to minor surgery. Dr. Rachel Hostetler, an Amish woman who had received her medical training with Foundation support, greeted them at the entrance. "Samuel's vision was simple," Dr. Hostetler explained, as she showed them the facility. "Why should our people have to choose between quality health care and preserving our way of life? This clinic serves 12 districts across 3 counties. We provide care that respects our values while meeting modern medical standards." Anna was fascinated by everything she saw, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her quick grasp of how the various projects work together. The medical clinic connected to the school through health education programs. The sustainable farming initiatives provided both economic opportunities for young families and research data for the agricultural college that trained Amish farmers in cutting-edge techniques. "It's like a big quilt," Anna observed, as they toured a furniture workshop that combined traditional craftsmanship with modern business practices. "Every piece depends on all the others." That evening, Bishop Troyer gathered a council of elders from across the region, men and women who had worked with Samuel for years and understood the stakes of the current battle. They met in the bishop's kitchen, 20 people crowded around a table laden with simple food and complex concerns. Harold Brennan has been making inquiries here as well, reported Bishop Joseph Miller from a neighboring district. He's been asking questions about the Foundation's activities, trying to establish some connection to our projects that would give him legal standing. What kind of questions? Eli asked. Whether Samuel ever promised him partnership in community development projects, whether any of our land purchases were made with money Harold claims is rightfully his. Bishop Miller's expression was grim. He's building a case that Samuel defrauded him of his share in not just the gas deposits, but everything that grew from them. Elder Sarah Byler, a woman whose wisdom had guided 3 generations of families, leaned forward with urgency. We've seen this pattern before. English businessmen who use our values against us. Our reluctance to fight in courts, our preference for peaceful resolution, our trust in others' good faith. Harold is counting on us to be passive. Samuel prepared for this, Bishop Troyer said, producing a thick folder. These documents prove that Harold has been repaid far more than he ever invested, through Samuel's anonymous support of his various ventures over the years. Samuel kept meticulous records. Anna, who had been listening quietly while coloring in a notebook, suddenly spoke up. Why don't we just show everyone what Uncle Samuel built? Let the whole community see how the foundation works, so they understand what we're fighting for. The suggestion created a moment of silence as the adults processed its implications. A community meeting, Bishop Troyer said slowly. Not just here, but in Pennsylvania. Invite representatives from every district that has benefited from Samuel's work. Let our people see the full scope of what has been accomplished. Harold, they won't be able to argue with success, added Elder Martha Yoder. When people see schools, medical clinics, and sustainable farms, they'll understand that this isn't about personal wealth. It's about community empowerment. The plan took shape through the evening as the elders contributed ideas and connections. Instead of fighting Harold's legal challenges in isolation, they would demonstrate the Foundation's value through the testimonies of hundreds of families whose lives had been improved. Instead of hiding Samuel's work, they would celebrate it openly, making it harder for Harold to characterize the Foundation as a fraud. But they all understood the risks. Going public would expose the full extent of the gas deposit's value, potentially attracting other predators. It would also force a reckoning within Amish communities about the proper relationship between faith and wealth, a conversation that could divide as easily as it could unite. Samuel spent 30 years building relationships and trust, Bishop Troyer said, as the meeting drew to a close. Now we must trust that Foundation is strong enough to support the weight of truth. The next morning, as they prepared to return to Pennsylvania, Dr. Hostetler pulled Eli aside for a private conversation. Samuel made me promise to tell you something if Harold ever surfaced, she said quietly. Harold has been borrowing against his expected inheritance from your gas deposits for years. He's made promises to investors, taken out loans, and committed to projects based on money he doesn't actually have. He's not just greedy, he's desperate. That makes him dangerous. The train ride home carried them through the same countryside they'd seen 2 days earlier, but everything looked different now. Eli understood that they weren't just returning to make decisions about their own future. They were carrying the hopes and fears of communities across multiple states. Anna had fallen asleep against his shoulder, her notebook open to a drawing. Of all the projects they'd seen in Ohio, in her child's vision, the medical clinic, school, farms, and workshops were all connected by curving lines that looked remarkably like the quilting patterns that held their communities together. As Pennsylvania farmland came into view through the train window, Eli felt a calm certainty settling over him. Samuel had been right. They had been prepared for this battle, though the preparation had often felt like loss and isolation. Now it was time to honor that preparation by fighting not just for their inheritance, but for the future of every community that could benefit from Samuel's vision of faithful stewardship. The hardest conversations still lay ahead, but Eli no longer feared them. With Anna's wisdom, Bishop Troyer's support, and the evidence of Samuel's success visible in Ohio, they had everything they needed to face whatever Harold Brennan could bring against them. The war for their inheritance was about to begin, but they would not fight it alone. The Lancaster County Courthouse had never seen anything quite like the gathering that assembled on the morning of October 15th. Representatives from 7 states had arrived throughout the week, Amish bishops, elders, and families whose lives had been touched by Samuel's quiet foundation work. They filled the courthouse steps and spilled into the adjacent park, their plain dress and calm demeanor creating a striking contrast to the chaos of reporters, lawyers, and curiosity seekers drawn by news of the legal battle. Harold Brennan arrived, in a convoy of black sedans, flanked by attorneys, whose expensive suits and briefcases announced their intentions as clearly as battle flags. At 65, Brennan was still an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, and radiating the aggressive confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. His eyes swept the crowd of Amish families with barely concealed contempt. "Look at this circus," he muttered to his lead attorney, Marcus Richardson. "They think their quaint little community theater will impress a judge." Richardson, a man who had built his reputation on corporate takeovers and hostile acquisitions, studied the gathered crowd with more tactical awareness. "Don't underestimate them, Harold. They wouldn't be here unless they had something substantial to present." Inside the courthouse, Judge Patricia Hoffman reviewed the case files with growing interest. In 30 years on the bench, she had seen every variety of inheritance dispute, but this case presented unique complexities. The legal issues were straightforward enough. Brennan claimed partnership rights in the gas deposits based on his early investment in geological surveys. But the case had attracted national attention because of the Foundation's work and the unusual spectacle of an entire religious community mobilizing to defend one family's inheritance. Eli sat at the defendant's table with Anna beside him, their simple presence a stark contrast to the army of lawyers surrounding Brennan. Their attorney, David Miller, no relation to the Ohio Millers, was himself Amish, a rare example of someone who had pursued legal education while maintaining his community ties. "The key to our defense," Miller had explained during their preparation, "is proving that Samuel not only repaid Brennan's original investment with substantial interest, but that Brennan has actually profited far more from Samuel's stewardship than he would have from any quick sale of gas rights." Anna had been remarkably calm throughout the morning preparations, her small hands folded in her lap as she watched the courtroom fill with familiar faces from their community and new friends from Ohio. When Bishop Troyer entered and nodded encouragingly, she smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who understood that she was surrounded by people who cared about more than money. "All rise," the bailiff called, and Judge Hoffman entered with the measured dignity of someone who had learned to cut through complexity to reach truth. Brennan's attorney opened with theatrical flourishes designed to paint Samuel as a manipulative fraud who had stolen his client's rightful partnership through deception and delays. He presented bank records showing Brennan's initial investment of $50,000 in 1983, geological surveys that confirmed the deposit's value, and correspondence proving that Samuel had promised partnership rights in any development. "Your Honor," Richardson declared, "my client invested not just money, but years of his life in developing this discovery. He has a legal and moral right to 50% of all proceeds from these gas deposits, a sum that could exceed $50 million based on current market estimates." The courtroom murmured at the figure, but Anna noticed that the Amish families remained silent and unmoved. They had come to defend something more valuable than money. David Miller's opening was quieter but more precise. "Your Honor, This case is not about partnership rights or disputed ownership. It is about a man who chose to honor his obligations completely while building something unprecedented, a foundation that has strengthened communities across 7 states and provided opportunities for thousands of families. Miller presented the first exhibit, financial records showing that Samuel had repaid Brennan's $50,000 investment through anonymous contributions to Brennan's various business ventures over 20 years. The total amount exceeded $200,000 with interest calculated at market rates. My client's brother fulfilled every obligation to Mr. Brennan years ago, Miller continued. What Mr. Brennan seeks now is not repayment, but extortion, a claim to wealth he never earned, and community benefits he never supported. Brennan's face reddened as the repayment records were displayed, but Richardson quickly objected. These anonymous payments prove nothing except that Samuel Stoltzfus was covering up his theft through guilt payments. Partnership agreements cannot be dissolved through secret payoffs. Judge Hoffman leaned forward with interest. Mr. Richardson, do you have documentation of this alleged partnership agreement? Something beyond initial investment in survey work. The question created the first crack in Brennan's confident facade. Richardson shuffled through papers with increasing urgency, while Brennan whispered harsh instructions. Finally, Richardson produced a single page, a handwritten note from 1983. This document clearly states Samuel's promise to share equally in any profits from gas extraction, Richardson said. David Miller rose to examine the document. Your Honor, this note is dated 3 months before Samuel left for his 10-year absence. It represents the thinking of a 19-year-old boy who had not yet grasped the full implications of such wealth. The Samuel Stoltzfus who returned in 1989 was a different man with different priorities. Irrelevant, Richardson snapped. A contract is a contract, regardless of age or subsequent life changes. But Judge Hoffman was studying the note carefully. Mr. Miller, do you have evidence of Samuel's state of mind when he wrote this? We do, Your Honor. Miller presented Samuel's journal entries from 1983, including the one that would prove decisive. Harold pushes for immediate development. But I am beginning to understand that this discovery could destroy our community. If handled wrongly, I must learn more before making commitments that could harm everything I love. Anna watched Harold Brennan's expression change as Samuel's words were read aloud. For the first time, she saw something that looked like doubt flickering in his eyes. The young man who had written that note hadn't been trying to defraud anyone. He had been struggling with the weight of responsibility that Brennan had never even considered. The afternoon session brought the testimony that would determine the case's outcome. Judge Hoffman had spent the lunch recess reviewing Samuel's financial records, and her questions upon returning suggested she was beginning to understand the true scope of what Samuel had accomplished. Mr. Miller, she said, I'd like to hear evidence about how these disputed assets have actually been used. The court needs to understand whether we're dealing with simple inheritance or something more complex. Anna straightened in her seat as Bishop Troyer approached the witness stand. She had watched him shepherd communities through challenges for decades, but had never seen him in a formal legal setting. His presence transformed the sterile courtroom into something that felt more like a church. Bishop Troyer, David Miller began, please tell the court about your relationship with Samuel Stoltzfus and the Foundation's work. Samuel was a man of extraordinary vision, Bishop Troyer said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had guided countless families through crisis. Beginning in 1995, he approached me and other bishops across the Midwest with a proposition. He had come into resources that could help our communities, but he wanted to ensure that help strengthened, rather than corrupted our way of life. Harold Brennan shifted uncomfortably as Bishop Troyer described the medical clinics, schools, and sustainable farming initiatives that had been funded through Samuel's careful stewardship. Each project represented years of planning and community involvement, guided by principles that prioritized long-term benefit over immediate gain. The Foundation has helped over 800 families. Bishop Troyer continued. Young couples who couldn't afford farmland, parents facing medical bills that exceeded our traditional mutual aid capacity, communities that needed modern schools designed to preserve traditional values. Richardson stood to object. Your Honor, this testimony is irrelevant to the question of partnership rights. My client is not seeking to destroy charitable work. He simply wants his fair share of the assets that made such work possible. Judge Hoffman looked at Richardson with obvious skepticism. Mr. Richardson, if your client receives 50% of the gas deposit's value, what happens to the foundation's ongoing commitments? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Richardson consulted quickly with Brennan before answering. The foundation could continue its work using Mr. Brennan's portion if he chose to contribute voluntarily. But there's no legal requirement for such contribution, Judge Hoffman pressed. No, Your Honor. Anna watched Bishop Troyer's expression. As he absorbed this exchange, she could see him calculating the implications. Hundreds of families whose support would disappear if Brennan gained control of half the foundation's resources. The next witness was Dr. Rachel Hostetler from Ohio, whose medical clinic served 12 Amish districts. She testified about the practical impact of Samuel's vision, describing families who could now receive quality health care without compromising their values. Samuel never sought recognition or control, Dr. Hostetler explained. He provided funding and asked only that we report on our progress. His goal was always to strengthen communities, not to build personal legacy. But it was Anna's testimony that proved most powerful. Judge Hoffman had initially hesitated to allow a 7-year-old to testify, but Anna's request to speak for herself had been too compelling to deny. Anna, David Miller said gently, can you tell the judge what you learned about your Uncle Samuel's work? Anna stood carefully, her small voice clear in the hushed courtroom. Uncle Samuel spent his whole life learning how to help people without hurting them. He studied and traveled and asked lots of questions because he wanted to make sure the money would make families stronger, not break them apart. She turned to look directly at Harold Brennan. I think maybe you helped Uncle Samuel at the beginning because you both wanted to help people. But then you got scared about having so much money, and Uncle Samuel got scared about using it wrong. Uncle Samuel chose to learn how to do better. You chose to stay scared and angry. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Richardson seemed struck by the child's directness. Anna, Judge Hoffman said, what would happen to the foundation's work if Mr. Brennan gets half of your inheritance? Lots of families wouldn't get help anymore, Anna replied matter-of-factly. Not because Mr. Brennan is mean, but because he doesn't know how Uncle Samuel figured out how to help people the right way. It took Uncle Samuel 30 years to learn. Mr. Brennan would have to start over. Richardson rose for cross-examination. But his questions seemed to deflate against Anna's honest responses. When he tried to suggest that she was too young to understand complex financial matters, Anna replied, I understand that Uncle Samuel loved me enough to learn how to take care of me, and lots of other people too. That's not complicated. The final testimony came from Eli himself. He spoke quietly about the burden Samuel had carried, the isolation he had chosen to protect his family, and the incredible gift he had left, not just money, but a proven method for using wealth to strengthen, rather than corrupt communities. Your Honor, Eli concluded, my brother spent 30 years preparing for this day. He knew Harold Brennan would eventually surface with legal claims. That's why Samuel documented everything. The repayments, the foundation's success, the community benefits. He wanted to prove that responsible stewardship serves justice better than quick settlements. As the testimony concluded, Judge Hoffman announced she would render her decision the following morning. But Anna could see in Harold Brennan's slumped posture and his attorney's frantic whispering that they already understood which way the evidence pointed. The truth about Samuel's vision and his brother's worthiness to continue it had been laid bare for all to see. Judge Hoffman entered the packed courtroom at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning. her expression revealing nothing of the decision that would affect hundreds of families across 7 states. The Amish representatives sat in respectful silence, while Harold Brennan's attorneys shuffled papers with the nervous energy of men who sensed their carefully constructed case crumbling. Anna sat between Eli and Bishop Troyer, her small hands folded in her lap, radiating the same calm confidence she'd shown throughout the proceedings. She had slept peacefully the night before, telling Eli that Uncle Samuel had appeared in her dreams to say everything would work out as it was meant to. This case, Judge Hoffman began, presents fundamental questions about the nature of partnership, the obligations of stewardship, and the difference between legal rights and moral claims. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I'm prepared to render my decision. She looked directly at Harold Brennan. Mr. Brennan, your claim rests on a 30-year-old handwritten note from a teenage boy who was overwhelmed by a discovery he didn't fully understand. While that note might constitute a preliminary agreement, the evidence clearly shows that Samuel Stoltzfus fulfilled any obligations to you through anonymous payments totaling more than 4 times your original investment. Brennan's face flushed. Red, but Judge Hoffman continued with calm authority. More significantly, the evidence demonstrates that you and Mr. Stoltzfus developed fundamentally different visions for these resources. You sought immediate profit through rapid extraction and sale. Samuel Stoltzfus chose the more difficult path of learning responsible stewardship. The Foundation's remarkable success across multiple states proves the wisdom of his approach. Anna felt Eli's hand squeeze hers gently as the judge's words confirmed what they had hoped but not dared expect. The court finds that Samuel Stoltzfus acted in good faith throughout his stewardship of these assets. His careful documentation, the Foundation's transparent operations, and the testimony of hundreds of beneficiaries prove that he was guided by principles of service rather than personal gain. Mr. Brennan's claim for partnership rights is denied in its entirety. The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration as Amish families embraced and whispered prayers of thanksgiving. Harold Brennan sat frozen in his chair, the weight of his failed gamble settling on his shoulders like lead. But Judge Hoffman wasn't finished. However, this court is troubled by Mr. Brennan's current financial distress, which appears to have driven his desperate legal action. While he has no claim to the gas deposits or Foundation assets, his original contribution to the discovery, a process deserves acknowledgement. She looked at Eli. Mr. Stoltzfus, while you are under no legal obligation to assist Mr. Brennan, I encourage you to consider whether your brother's principles of stewardship might extend to helping someone whose poor decisions have led to genuine hardship. Anna tugged on Eli's sleeve and whispered something in his ear. Eli nodded and stood. Your Honor, he said quietly, my granddaughter reminds me that Uncle Samuel always said the goal wasn't to punish poor choices, but to help people learn from them. If Mr. Brennan is willing to work with the Foundation, not as a partner, but as someone who could benefit from my brother's approach to responsible stewardship, we might find ways to address his financial difficulties while preserving the Foundation's mission. Harold Brennan looked up with surprise that gradually shifted to something that might have been hope. For the first time in the proceedings, he seemed to see Anna and Eli not as obstacles to his plans, but as people offering him an unexpected lifeline. The formal establishment of the Samuel Stoltzfus Foundation as a legal entity took place 3 months later in a ceremony that brought together representatives from 12 states. Anna cut the ribbon with scissors that had belonged to Samuel, while Eli signed documents that would ensure the Foundation's work continued for generations. Dr. James Mitchell had agreed to oversee the responsible development of the gas deposits, using extraction methods that minimized environmental impact while generating the steady income needed to fund the Foundation's expanding work. The first wells would be drilled using the most advanced technology available, with profits earmarked for medical clinics, educational initiatives, and sustainable farming projects across Amish communities nationwide. Harold Brennan had surprised everyone by accepting the Foundation's offer of financial counseling and gradual debt relief in exchange for his expertise in geological analysis. His pride had been deeply wounded, but his practical knowledge proved valuable in developing extraction protocols that balanced profit with environmental protection. 6 months after the court case, Anna started attending the new one-room schoolhouse that had been built on the edge of their property, a perfect example of how traditional Amish education could be enhanced without compromising core values. The building used solar power and modern materials, but maintained the classical appearance and teaching methods that had served Amish children for generations. Eli often found her after school, sitting beneath the old oak tree, reading or working on arithmetic problems, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of a working farm. The gas wells were barely visible from the house, hidden behind stands of trees and designed to blend into the landscape. The steady income they generated had transformed not just Anna's future, but the possibilities for hundreds of families who would benefit from the Foundation's work. "Grossdaddy," Anna said one autumn evening as they walked through fields that hummed quietly with the machinery of responsible progress. "Do you think Uncle Samuel knew it would turn out this way?" Eli considered the question while watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The land looked much as it had when Samuel was alive, but everything had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Medical bills no longer forced. Families to choose between health and tradition. Young couples could afford farmland that would have been beyond their reach. Educational opportunities existed that preserved Amish values while preparing children for modern challenges. "I think your uncle knew that good intentions and careful planning eventually triumph over fear and greed," Eli said finally. "He also knew that the right people would recognize the difference." Anna nodded and picked up a smooth stone from the path, examining it in the fading light. "I want to write a school essay about true wealth," she said. "Mrs. Yoder says I should write about things I understand." As they walked back to the farmhouse, where Samuel's Bible still sat on the kitchen table and his pressed flowers still marked the seasons of his secret struggle, Eli realized that Anna understood more about wealth, both its dangers and its possibilities, than most adults ever would. The inheritance that had once seemed like an overwhelming burden had become exactly what Samuel had envisioned, a tool for strengthening communities, preserving traditions, and ensuring that future generations could choose their own path without abandoning the wisdom of those who had walked before them. Sometimes, Eli reflected as he tucked Anna into bed beneath the community quilt that surrounded her with love from 20 families, the greatest treasures really are the ones that take the longest to discover and the most courage to claim.